Why did no one tell me how good the sci-fi storytelling is in Warframe? It's only been 13 years since the game came out. And look, I had a very wrong impression of Warframe, or maybe half right. Every time I tuned into like a Warframe stream or ever watched any gameplay, it was just like Warframe speeding through, jumping, blasting through levels, and like, oh, cool, it's the same as Destiny. Like, no one pays attention. Everyone just has got to go fast. Boy, I was wrong. Obviously, I started playing Destiny, looking for a substitution on my addiction to video gaming, and thought, oh, you know what, I'll give Warframe a shot. And I've been absolutely blown away, well, with the storytelling, really. And the gameplay is also great. And look, I just had the wrong impression of what Warframe was. So I guess this is kind of like my first impressions of a game that's 13 years old. I've been streaming every day almost for the last week on YouTube, right here on YouTube, and on Twitch. We're at day 9 now. So if you want to see some of the previous live streams, my reactions to certain missions, you can have a look at that. Just go to the live tab on YouTube and have a squiz. If you want other content, please let me know. I don't know how you make content on a game that's 13 years old, but people seem to like me reacting to some of the missions, and I don't blame them because they are amazing. So yeah, I've put about 50 hours into Warframe. Here's my initial thoughts. Of course, there's going to be a lot of comparisons to Destiny, just because I've played Destiny for 10 years. I think they're actually a good comparison. They're both free to play. By the way, that's quotation marks for Destiny, not for Warframe. They're both free to play, loot and shooters, sci-fi. So I think they're good comparisons to make as well. But please don't get upset. If you're still playing Destiny, you love Destiny, like, I'm not trying to yuck your yum. It's just that that's my frame of reference. That's my context. Played a lot of Destiny, jumped over to Warframe, and Warframe does a lot of things really, really well. Okay, let me start with my thoughts on the story. Now, of course, I haven't completed everything, and I keep getting told by everyone, just wait, it gets better. But I feel like I've played enough to give some good thoughts on it. One of the things that I kept thinking when I was playing this game is it feels very familiar. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, every time something happened, I was like, oh, that's a little bit like Halo. Or that's a little bit like Destiny. Or that's a little bit like, insert sci-fi movie or game. But it's not that Warframe is copying it, because in some cases, Warframe came out before those franchises. Other cases, it came out after. But it's more that it is well within that theme of sci-fi, with things that you expect. The Void, the Veil. Oh, God. Flashbacks about the Veil. Similar to a fantasy book or a game, you're going to expect it to be magic and dragons and wizards, right? So a lot of it feels familiar, but it is still very unique, and it has very well-developed characters and just tells good stories within that theme, and more importantly, delivers satisfying conclusions while still maintaining the mystery, and usually there's a little bit of shock in there too. So I think a good example of this is the second dream. So this is kind of like the first big reveal. By the way, spoilers for a 13-year-old game. If you haven't played and you're coming off the back of Destiny, a little bit like me, and you're looking for something else, be aware there is some great story in Warframe, and it is free to play, and I'll get to my thoughts on free to play. So maybe stop the video and go give it a shot. It does take a long time to get through a lot of this stuff, so you're in for a little bit, but if you're dedicated, it is worth the payoff. Trust me. Anyway, the second dream is obviously a really big pivotal moment in, I think that's Act 1, right? And it was feeling very familiar. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be like the Traveler. We have the floozy Watsits, the unknown source of power for the Warframes that, like the Traveler and Guardians and whatever this thing was, and Warframes, and, I'm not expecting anything big here. And then they do give you a very satisfying conclusion to that was, hey, there's like these souped up children awoken. No, these children are actually piloting the Warframes. And that then sat in my head. I was like, oh, that's why it's called Warframe. Because I actually asked really early on, what's the difference between a Tenno and a Warframe? And everyone's like, oh, that's a spoiler. And then this happened. I was like, okay, that's like a really nice reveal, really nice conclusion. But there's obviously a lot of mystery still there, and lots of things I still didn't understand. But the core component, I did understand. These kids have powers, and they now are piloting the Warframes, and that's kind of the basis of this world. And that was satisfying without answering all the questions. And obviously this is how like I felt about Destiny for a really long time. Like there's this massive world behind everything being written, and that we will eventually get answers and conclusions and things that feel really satisfying, and there will still be mystery there. Obviously I'm pretty jaded about that at the moment when it comes to Destiny, and Warframe kind of gave me that within the first act, and that was really impressive. From my understanding, Warframe didn't have all these stories straight away when it first released, so I am kind of getting the best of Warframe, I guess. But credit to them, it's still in the game and you can still play it, and as a new player experience, it's pretty bloody good. So that's kind of the first thing I feel like. Comments on the story feels really familiar in like a sci-fi setting, but also very unique, and they balance giving the player these mini conclusions all the time. Like that was just one example with like Second Dream, but all the side missions also have these, you know, satisfying conclusions, but they also just throw in a bunch of other space magic mystery in there that you have to, you know, find out as you go progress with the game. And I think also I just felt like because it starts so strong, I feel confident that they're going to continue to answer stuff. And I don't know if that's true or not, but if it can, based on people's comments and on YouTube, I think it's going to keep getting better, and that feels really good. Cool. The next thing I think is just like Destiny and Warframe kind of have the same canvas for delivering story, right? If you think about Destiny, you've got like strike missions, you know, raids and dungeons, and then you know, if you've got some open world areas, you've got hub areas. Warframe's pretty similar. If you haven't played Warframe, you've got you know, nodes, which is essentially like strike missions. You got some open world areas, and you've also got like hub areas. So like the canvas is pretty similar for how you could maybe tell a story. But Warframe does a bunch of different stuff that really helps with in-game storytelling. One of the things that I was surprised about is like the picture in picture. So when you have like this dialogue while you're playing a mission, you have, you know, a video feed comes up with who's talking, and then they might be talking backwards and forwards between someone else. And it's a very subtle and small thing, but it makes a huge difference for like engagement with that character, knowing that character, paying attention when a lot of things are happening on the screen. And if you compare just that one thing change with, you know, having a face on the screen that's telling the story compared to just subtitles, it makes a crazy big difference. I was like, man, I'm actually listening properly here. And most of the time I'm like stopping what I'm doing to like listen to this back and forth conversation between, you know, the next villain or someone else or whatever character, whoever I'm getting instruction from. So that's a very small thing that I think has really big impact on the in-game storytelling. Then you also have things like these set pieces, which really blew me away. So they're not worm gods. Are they worm gods? These massive worms. I was like, now that's a worm god. You know, coming, I think it was Deimos having this fight as you entered like this open area. I'm like, well, that's cool. That's pretty nice. And not just like set pieces like that, but often you'll meet like NPCs out in the world when you first introduce them. And it just feels so much more natural than always having to go to a hub to first meet someone, or, you know, only hearing their voice. Like you might fight alongside them and then you'll go and meet them, or they might welcome you to the planet first and then you'll go to their hub world. And I was like, yeah, that's a great way to introduce characters like in their natural environment rather than like on a hologram or somewhere else. The other thing is music. Holy, I thought people were overreacting when everyone's like, oh, yay, go to Fortuna, go to Fortuna, go to Fortuna. And then you get the introduction music when you go to Fortuna. And that is obviously very significant for the story and the characters in that place and the world building. So you get this interaction between music, characters, development, storytelling. It's absolute banger. Apparently there's more bangers to come that I haven't heard yet. Unfortunately, there's been someone false copyright striking that music. I would love to play it right now, but I can't because everything keeps getting demonetized because someone's claiming that music. But great integration of gameplay, music, character development, storytelling to really set like an area and a theme. And yeah, impressive. The other thing I think that along those lines, especially with Fortuna, that really stood out for me was the mature theme. And I think Destiny really suffers from this because of its rating, its video game rating. You know, there's no like blood and dismemberment and stuff like that for Warframe. But more importantly, with how they tell a story, if you look at Destiny's lore, it's pretty mature. Like if you go read the stuff, it's pretty mature. But when you get into game, it just doesn't really have that punch to it like Warframe does. Like Fortuna blew me away. I was like, oh my God. They're like cutting pieces of people off to get them out of debt and then re-getting them back into debt. And like, I was like, why are they missing their heads? Is there lore on that? And everyone's like, just why? There's probably spoilers around. You know, I was like, why do they take their heads first? And it was really refreshing to actually play that and see that in a video game to tackle some of those things. I also just played, is it Chains of Harrow? Like, you know, also really cool. Go watch my reaction to that. So it's really nice to see mature themes in the game and not just like in the lore, but like actually playing them out. That's great. The last thing really is they do use a lot of other like subtle storytelling techniques. So, you know, you'd be running like a strike mission, a node, but they'll remove the enemies, which is, you know, subtle, but it makes you slow down. It makes you not run through everything. It makes you pay attention to what's going on. Or they might turn the lights off and you have, you know, a light on to increase, you know, the mood, so to make you a little bit more scary. And it actually does pretty good with lighting and all that kind of stuff to help tell the story as you go through an area, rather than just like throwing all these enemies at you and just like dumping exposition on you. It's like kind of a hint to the player to like slow down here. We're going to like tell you some stuff. Like even in myself for Harrow, I was probably going a little bit too quick because I checked the YouTube comments. People are like, oh, you missed some writing on the wall that was in blood, which is, you know, some environmental storytelling going on. Overall, I just feel like when I play Warframe and these missions, it was like the story was created first and then everything else was molded around that. And if you watch my reason why I quit Destiny, it was like I always felt like it was the other way around. They created the template of hologram, go collect data, and then the writing team was forced to like try to mold some sort of story around these components. Where in Warframe, I feel like the story was written and then they, you know, made this area suit that. That might not be true, but that's how I feel. At the very least, I feel like the story comes first and it's like a centerpiece and the gameplay complements that rather than the other way around. And technically it probably was the other way around because apparently the story wasn't there at the first. It was just kind of like the loot and shooter part of Warframe. So they've done obviously really well to give that impression. Okay, let's talk about the moment-to-moment gameplay, starting with bullet jumping, because this was the area that I think put me off the most whenever I watched like Warframe. Like, what is this game? Like, kind of looks good, but it's also making me motion sick. And it was actually the reason I never played Warframe, because I watched videos and actually felt motion sick from watching the bullet jumping. Thankfully, when I played it, probably because I'm also going quite slow compared to like veteran players, I didn't actually feel motion sick. I got a headache a couple times, and you know, maybe that's probably streaming for 8 hours and not drinking water or eating food. But you know, it's very fast paced and the bullet jumping. But once I played it, I get the appeal of it. I understand the skill to it and how you know, how you combined. Oh man. Everyone just like, you need to double jump, mid-air slide, glide, space bar, slide back in, bullet jump. I think I know it now, and that was not it. But I think I know the combo now. I'm still not very good at it, I'm proficient at it, but I get it. I get why it is appealing to blast through like you know, the missions like that, and that is pretty fun. So yay, bullet jumping. Loot. Talk about the loot. It's interesting because if you compare it to something like Destiny, the loot is, from what I understand so far, very directed. You know, it's very much towards the crafting end of things where you can go, I want to get this. Where do I get these materials from? Let's go get it. Obviously, you get other drops too, like the mods drop for you. And I have no idea like what that looks like towards the end game, because I think that's going to get more complicated as we go on. For example, I just got a Riven mod, which I don't know what that does yet. And there's still things being revealed to me. So I don't fully understand like the complexity of the build crafting yet. But I do see layers being added on top, like when I unlocked the 10-0 and there was like another skill tree, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I got a ribbon mod, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then, of course, I think the big appeal of Warframe is the variety in stuff you can craft, right? So I feel like every time you get a little bit of bored of something, you move on. So you craft a Warframe, you get it to max level. You're like, okay, I'm going to try another Warframe now. And then you've maxed out your weapon. And you're like, okay, now I'm going to try another weapon now. Then you've maxed out your melee. And so I think that is what keeps the gameplay fresh, is you just keep cycling through your Warframes, your weapons, and every time you get a new Warframe, the gameplay feels fresh again. And technically, you're doing the same missions you've been doing for the last 50 hours, but that big, crafting dopamine hit when you get a new Warframe and start playing around with their weapons and doing different builds, and like that's what's keeping me going. And I'm sure that's probably what is keeping Warframe players going for so long, is that directedness into what you can craft, and you've got enough things in rotation, it keeps feeling fresh. I hope so anyway. The other super impressive thing, and the last time I had this feeling was Halo 2 and Halo Reach. Is it Reach? In Warframe, when I got access to the Archwing, I was like, oh my God, a flying mission? This is crazy. Maybe remember the missions in Halo when you get into space. I was like, that's kind of cool. We haven't had this experience in a while. And then I unlocked the Railjack, a real flying mission. I was like, what? I'm inside a spaceship. I get other people to help me man the spaceship. There's turrets. I can fly it around. I don't even really understand Railjack yet. Apparently it's like I could do a whole bunch of missions, right? Like I could just play Railjack and it's like a different game. That is incredibly impressive. And when you put all of this on top of like a fair bit of loot variety, a fair bit of like autonomy for the player where you can decide what you want to craft and how you want to play the game, and you've got these other basically mini games within a game, yeah, it feels fresh. I'm 50 hours deep and I'm feeling like I still want to get more gear, try more Warframes. I've only tried 2 Warframes, Rhino and Mag. And there's like, 60 Warframes to try? It's a lot of content. Okay, let's talk about the free-to-play nature of Warframe, because this stunned me. It is truly free-to-play. And I think Aztecross said the exact same thing when he started playing Warframe. Open the Battle Pass. Okay, so how much do I have to pay? Where's the paid track on the Battle Pass? It's free. It's all free. All the content I've played is free. And my understanding of it is that is this right? I can get everything without paying any money. Like the stuff in the shop, I can pay for if I want to, but I could also earn it if I wanted to as well. I think most of it is like that. If there is anything, you can correct me on that. That's my understanding so far, and all the content's still in the game, and it seems very true to be a free-to-play game. You don't have to pay. There's not any like hidden fees there, and I'm completely fine with there being microtransactions for skins, but it seems like you can still earn them as well anyway. And the crafting times, right? Like when you craft something, it takes like 12 hours, which I think if you're not used to games like this, which I've never really experienced that before, I was like, what? I gotta wait 12 hours? But there's so much goodwill to the developers. I'm like, I've got so much content here that I've played. I've kind of embraced the 12-hour, the 24-hour wait. It's kind of like the next day I log in, I get like a little present. I get to use a new weapon or a new Warframe or something they've had cooking in the crafter while that's going on. Of course, you can pay a bit of money to speed it up. And in that case, it's just pay to fast track rather than pay to win or anything like that. And I can still earn everything just by playing the game. I also believe there's a pretty comprehensive like trading system. I haven't got there yet. But I could trade stuff as well, which I just think it's all what you would want in a free-to-play game. We kind of expect there to be so much scumminess in free-to-play games these days. It's kind of shocking that it's just like, yeah, it's free-to-play. And I think the irony in all this, I think when you give people a great game that is truly free-to-play, people are probably more likely to spend money, right? Like I feel like, hey, okay, I played it for 50 hours. I'd probably spend some bucks, dollary dues now. That's no problem. Do I have any criticisms of Warframe after someone who's just only put 50 hours in, basically a week of gameplay? Do I not like anything? So a lot of this is not really criticisms. I think they're very fair expectations of a game that's been around for 13 years. The Warframe systems, there are a lot of systems laid on top of each other, or systems completely separate of each other, like Railjack. There are an immense amount of like currencies and crafting materials, but I think that's pretty reasonable for a game of this age, and I think it's pretty reasonable for a free-to-play game too. Like any free-to-play game has a lot of currencies in them, so I don't really think it's a criticism. There is just a learning curve with this game to understand how all these systems work and to get your head around them, and they do, like, you know, anything, they start making sense. I think, you know, Twitch chat and YouTube chat have definitely helped me understand things quicker. I still think it's a pretty good first player experience, but I do think there are some hurdles there with understanding this stuff. If you didn't have someone helping, you'd probably have to go out of your way to look at some YouTube videos to understand things a bit better, but that's not necessarily negative. Like, I typically like games that don't tell you everything. You have to work some things out yourself. You might have to join a community, join a Discord, try to get a little bit better. That doesn't mean they couldn't have a better first player experience, but I think overall, I think it's pretty reasonable for how old the game is and how many things are going on in it that there's going to be a little bit of confusion. So that's not, there you go. If I was being really picky and I wanted to upset you, Warframe kids, maybe this won't upset you. Maybe this is right. I think the bosses are probably the weakest aspect of this game. When I first fought Jackal, I thought, oh, this is wicked. If every boss is like some version of this, like learning some mechanic and using some of the movement to get around, then, you know, doing DPS phases and stuff, like that's kind of cool. And then some bosses was a bit meh. That's my only criticism. And I believe some bosses have been reworked, so maybe Digital Extremes knew that their bosses were maybe the weaker component of the game and started updating them. I'm not too sure. I don't know what the history about the bosses are, but some bosses I've really liked and some bosses I felt were a bit average, to be honest. And this game would, I mean, I think the game's fantastic as it is, but I mean, if they had, the bosses were all 10 out of 10s as well, I mean, you're like, this is an excellent game. There you go. If I'm being picky and I want to upset you. Talking about upsetting people, let's talk about my experiences with the community. Everyone's lovely. Everyone loves the game. Y'all a bit intense though. You leave me absolute TED Talks, which is fine. It comes from a place of passion, a place of like wanting to help. Very intense with wanting to help. I've been pretty good at taking the advice, doing my best to learn and to realize people just want to help. People love it when you love their game, and I definitely do enjoy the game. So I do appreciate all the comments and the feedback and like the helping, but probably a summary of it is, and someone wrote this in a comment as well, Warframe veterans want to jam 12 years of knowledge down your throat. Kind of true. So I'm just trying to take as much as I can, and, you know, I'm not going to get all of it straight away. But in general, I think when gaming communities really like their game, it's a much better place to be in than, you know, gaming communities that are unhappy with the current state of their game. And it seems like Warframe community is pretty happy with the state of the game for a game that's 13 years old, and they're just happy to accept anyone coming in and talking about it. So if that's you, a like and a comment would be greatly appreciated. Let me know what else you want to see from Warframe if you want to see more Warframe. I think people have asked for like a supercut of the story missions to see my reactions to them, like rather than having to watch like a 7-hour live stream, you know, like Act 1 supercut. So if you want that, let me know. You can leave a comment, Warframe, if you can't think of it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Tune into the live streams, you ding-dongs.